Hello from Sanibel, and welcome to our program, The Charisma of Cowries, with Dr. José Leal. My name is Sam Ankerson. I'm the Executive Director of the Bailey Matthews National Shell Museum, and we're so glad you have joined us for this program about a large and diverse group of mollusks found worldwide that is often known for their smooth, shiny, beautifully patterned shells. It's a group of mollusks that's close to José's heart. I know he probably couldn't pick favorites, but cowries are among them. And it's also a group of shells that has played a unique role in human history and culture over centuries across many cultures, where they're used for a variety of purposes, games, adornment and jewelry, currency, ritual. And cowries have been for a long time among the most popular exhibits at the museum, and are going to be a central focus of the Great Hall of Shells redesign and reintroduction that we are looking forward to rolling out with the reopening of the museum. José's talk will focus mostly on the biology, biodiversity, and natural history of cowries. A quick note on the museum's reconstruction for those of you who have been tracking it. We continue to work steadily. The museum is as active a construction site now as it's been. Work has began in April, and it's in high gear, and we're moving steadily towards reopening the museum in phases beginning in early 2024. This program is the last in our series of summer and fall online lectures. We're in process right now of putting together our winter and spring series of lectures, and we're looking to do as many of those as possible in person, either at the museum or elsewhere in Sanibel. And there may be a few sprinkled in there online as well. So stay tuned. We will be announcing details of that in the coming weeks. Tonight's this program, I know it's not night everywhere for people who are tuning in. This program is being recorded and will be posted on the museum's website in the education lectures section, where it will join an archive of over 20 online lectures that can be accessed anytime free of charge. If you have questions, and there's been one or two that have come in already, this is the webinar format, and the way to ask questions is to scroll along either the top or bottom of your screen for the chat button, and press that and type in your question at any time. And after José's presentation, we'll be glad to take a look at all the questions and answer them. And so now it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. José Leal, who has been with the museum since 1996, currently Science Director and Curator, served many years as Executive Director, has been a thought leader for the museum for 27 years, and an organizational leader as well. He earned his Ph.D. from the University of Miami, served on many boards, continues to sit on many boards in the fields of conchology and malacology, contributes to many journals, edits many journals, including the Nautilus Journal of Malacology, which is published by the museum and organized by José. Enjoy the presentation. Thank you, José, for putting it together, and following the presentation, we'll look forward to your questions. Thank you
very much. Well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight. And as Sam said, it may not be night elsewhere. So thank you for being here. And I really like the topic. As Sam said, since I was a little kid, cowries were probably the first group of shells that attracted me to conchology and malacology. And it's easy to understand why. I mean, they are, neat objects. If you don't even think about the animal, the shells are just spectacular. Um, the glossiness, the shiny aspect, some of the color patterns, and they're just unbelievably beautiful. But when you look into the natural history, what the animals do for a living, it becomes even more attractive. And we'll see some of that tonight. A couple of disclaimers. There's a lot that can be said, as Sam mentioned, there's a lot that can be said about the cultural aspects of cowries. I won't be covering that today. That may be, the topic for another program given by me or by someone else. Also, I want to make another disclaimer. I'm not a specialist in the taxonomy of cowries. I mean, it's a very um, specialized field of malacology. So if we have tough questions about, the current names and who is more closely related to who in the world of cowries, you can send the message, send to the chat, and I can look it up for you if I don't know the answer right away. So let's take a look at what's going on with cowries from my corner of the world. They are a relatively diverse, as Sam said, group of gastropods. There are about the last count, I think, around 200 species, and most cowries are shallow water mollusks, and they live between the tropics. So, tropical marine shallow water group of snails. Where is the higher concentration of species? Well, there was a study done by Gustav Pauli, Chris Meyer, when Chris was still in Florida at the museum. Chris Meyer is a curator at the Smithsonian, and Gustav, a curator at the Florida Museum of Natural History. So they did a compilation of species, where they are, and they created this called heat map, where the colors tending to orange represent higher numbers of species. And they found that the higher numbers of species are concentrated around the Philippine Islands in French Polynesia. The darker orange color here, with more than 75 species in each of those two areas. Those numbers may have changed again, because that study was published 17 years ago, but I don't think the general pattern has changed much. So keep that in mind. When you look at the Caribbean, that number is much, much smaller. We do have a few, I mean, a half dozen species, or a little more, depending on who you listen to in malacology. Not many species. The main focal area is, the Southwest Pacific. Again, I was talking about the likability, the ability to be liked that this group of shells has garnered. And you can understand why when you look at this picture. Those are some of the cowries that were in our previous cowries exhibit in the museum that was open in 2011. That exhibit, as Sam said, that exhibit will be redone, and it will be redone in a more updated fashion. And we'll still have all those shells there for your enjoyment. Let's take a look at some of the shells. I won't be saying the names. Many of those species have no common names, but I just want you. I have two slides, two plates with some worldwide cowries for your enjoyment. They were also in the old exhibit, and they must be in the new one if all goes well. So you can see that the general aspect of the shell. Cowries have this situation where the last whorl of the shell kind of is involving whatever was done before. So it's a kind of a unique involute shell. And usually the aperture is slit-like. It's just as if someone had cut the shell, and there are those little projections that we call the teeth, quote unquote, that help prevent predators from reaching inside and grabbing the animal. A few favorites: old-fashioned Armeniaca, which is a collector's choice in the old days, and still is, Brother Rippy, and the lovely, to me, this is really one of the most appealing of the cowries, the dewdrop cowrie, gutata. Zoila marginata, that looks like I don't know, like a small empanada. It's about at most 3 inches long. Perla, very, very sought after. That shell was in the old exhibit too. And Zoila illudens. And Zoila illudens is really cool because if you look closely, depending on the calibration of your computer monitor, you will be able to see that there is a little light blue on that shell color. And light blues and greens are not very common. I mean, greens are still a little more common, but blues are very rare to see in shell patterns in general. Cruikshanky from South Africa, little species, Naria ostergaardi, and another species from Japan, in the genus Lincina, same genus as the golden cowrie. Let's talk a little about the age of cowries. Papers that published, in the last 2 decades have determined that the cowrie-like shells, or shells made by cowrie-like animals, go back about 100 million years ago in the late Cretaceous, and that's pretty old. This is a copy of a paper, first page on a plate, a paper published by Lindsay Groves, my colleague at the Los Angeles County Museum of Natural History, who specializes in fossils and especially in fossil cowries. So it's a very old group, many, many, many fossil cowries all over the world, the tropical, the paleotropical world, if you will. A couple of examples of fossils. This is the shell that's my hand actually holding this giant, and it's one of the shells in the museum collection that will be in the new exhibition. That's a giant cowrie, Gigantoscypria gigas, and from I think the province of Victoria in Australia, from the middle Miocene, I would say about 20 million years of age, probably. It's a super shell. When I show that to collectors and enthusiasts, they don't believe that's a real shell, so large. Let me go back. That shell is about 7 inches long. Some fossils from Europe. This one is in the genus Gisortia. It is a cowrie, but it's a cowrie that's really cool looking because it resembles almost like a conch, almost like a queen conch, for those of you who know what a queen conch is. So it has those protuberances, and that really make it look like a true conch in the family Strombidae, but it's not. It is a cowrie that measures about 6. The largest one, I think, is about 6.2 inches long. Another cowrie from Normandy in France. This one, Gisortia gigantea, in the collection of paleontology at the museum in Paris, from the Eocene epoch. And that one, 10.5 inches. So it's getting bigger. They're getting bigger as we go. Again, they look like a conch. They're really spectacular shells. And the largest cowrie ever found is this behemoth called, I would say, Vestitia bizzotoi from Italy, from the upper Eocene. And that beast measures, the largest one goes up to 13.2 inches. It's larger than a foot long. And it's, again, a shell that when you look hard at that, you can see the traces of a, true cowrie, but still, it does look almost like a conch. So those are some of the some of the large cowries. This is the largest species known so far. Most of the large cowries are fossils. Of the living species, the largest one, we have the honor to host the largest living cowrie in our backyard. I mean, if you go out a little bit in the Gulf of Mexico, you'll find a deer cowrie that can reach about 7.5 inches long. So it's right there. So we don't find them on the beaches on Sanibel, but we may find fragments of that. We have quite a few fragments of this species in the museum collection. Maybe some of you have found one. It's a common species in Florida. It's found in the Florida Keys and most parts of the Gulf of Mexico and the east coast of Florida. Well, what about the smallest living cowrie? The smallest living cowrie is what I created a name, rice cowrie. And I created a name. I was looking, scouring the internet to see if someone had given a common name to that species. And I didn't find anything. Maybe someone has found that, but if they found it, let me know. Called rice cowrie because the species ending of the species name, Oryziformis, means shaped like a grain of rice. And it's actually, it can be as small as an adult, as a grain of rice, as a long grain of rice. 0.2 inch, a fifth of an inch. It's pretty small, and it is the smallest known cowrie. So I anticipated someone may ask, what do cowries eat? Cowries are complicated because depending on the species, they may have different diets. But generally speaking, many species will eat algae, seaweed, sponges, marine sponges, bryozoans, which is a form of colonial animal that creates little structures like fabric, hard fabric, and carry on. A good example of a sponge-eating cowrie is the tiger cowrie, and the variety that lives in Hawaii, around the Hawaiian Islands. They feed on sponges, including, and I found the fact to be very interesting from a conservation standpoint, that they feed on the invasive orange keyhole sponge. And there was a paper I found a couple of days ago that found that they eat about half their weight in sponges per week. So they're helping mitigate the invasion of this orange keyhole sponge in shallow water in the Hawaiian Islands. Let's take a look here quickly about on the reproduction and development, and then the growth of cowries, including their shell. Well, cowries, they lay eggs. They lay eggs in egg capsules. And then the female will spend some time, which is kind of unusual, to spend some time taking care of the eggs. It's almost like a maternal care, if you will. Be taking care of the eggs, and eventually, most species of cowries will produce planktonic veliger larvae. And the veliger larvae are larvae that live in open water for a few days, a few weeks, depending on the species, and that will then be carried by ocean currents and settle down elsewhere. And this is a illustration here of the shell just after the metamorphosis, which happens when is the change from the open water lifestyle to the bottom crawling lifestyle, which is something really cool that many gastropods in the ocean do. The shell of that larva is totally different from the shell of the adult. And the shell of the juvenile, the young cowrie after it settles, is also different. And I'll give you a couple of examples next. It's the shell at that point, the teenager cowrie looks like the shell of a bubble snail or bubble shell, and it's called the bulla stage in cowrie lingo. And then the cycle closes with the adult and starts again. I'll have a couple of pictures to show you next of a couple of situations in relation to reproduction. This is a species called the Beck's cowrie. And there's suggestion that that species and some other species of cowries mate for life, which is pretty impressive, given that those animals are not super developed or super evolved vertebrates. That they stay together for as long as they live. Next, I have a picture of the egg capsules. The egg capsules are very translucent, transparent, and inside each capsule, you'll find a number of eggs that will develop then into, the open water veliger larvae. This species is the money cowrie, and which is one of the most common and the best known species of cowrie that was used as currency for literally for centuries, thousands of years, if you will, and it's still used as currency in some of the Southwest Pacific islands. I will show you a couple of videos now. This is an illustration of a cowrie on, it's a female cowrie taking care of the egg masses. And the videos I'm going to be showing you now were shot by a super photographer and cinema video guy, Scott Johnson, who lived for many years in the Marshall Islands in Kwajalein. And he did a lot of diving in Bali and the Marshall Islands. And the museum has a debt of gratitude to Scott because we use a lot of his materials, and he's very generous in allowing us to do that. So let's take a look at the thick-edged cowrie, the Ironia corica, and the mother hovering over the egg mass. And apparently what they do is they make sure that there are no encroachments, there is no damage being done to the eggs. If you look carefully, you can see the egg capsules and the tiny, tiny dots that are the eggs inside the capsules. I have a couple more videos for you. Let me go back. Okay, let me go forward, actually. Now, the eroded cowrie, Naria erosa. Again, this one actually has sound. And it's a female, a mother, taking care of the egg masses. And that's a quite different type of egg capsule. It does have this dark coloration. It was almost like grains of black bean. Very interesting animal. The famous golden cowrie. Now there are no eggs, it's just the animal, doing its strutting around the coral reef. That's the classic golden cowrie. You can see the mantle, that goes up and down the size of the shell. And on the bottom part of the mantle, there are little papillae or little projections that are sensorial in nature. So the animal can feel whether or not someone is coming or touching the soft part of the animal. So that's the golden cowrie, Lycina aurantium. Again, that's a living money cowrie, probably going from one bank to another investment house, being that it's money cowrie. It's a bad joke, but here we go. See, this one also has the little papillae, which are almost like sensors. They have, surrounding the base of the shell, around the base of the shell. And you can see the color of the mantle is just quite spectacular. The shell itself is drab. There's not a lot of color, but the mantle has this fingerprint pattern that's super cool. This is called the little S cowrie, and it's a cowrie that really, the shell itself is spectacular. It's very white and has dark gray, very dark gray stripes across the back. And here we go. So you can see the two tentacles here. The main tentacles of the head is under here. And you have the siphon here that's sucking water for breathing and also for checking the quality of the water. There are different smells, predator smell. They can take measure and protect themselves. It's a chemosensory set of structures inside the mantle to help with that. The porous cowrie, Nautilus. One of the small cowries, and the shell is really cool. Has those little dots, white dots surrounded by a darker area. And this one is loaded with sensorial papillae. It's pretty cool because the animal can feel anything that get near it. And once they do feel something that they don't like, they can retract back inside the shell in less than a second. The brown spotted cowrie, that's really a tiny shell. It's probably about a half an inch in size. And this one is really lovely because it goes very fast. And you can see the siphon, the prominent siphon on, like a chimney in front of the shell. Tentacles, you can see the foot, and you can see the mantle enveloping the shell completely. I think there's one more. Yeah, that's the last one of the very large species of Indo-West Pacific cowries, the tortoise cowrie. It's a large shell, may reach 4 or 5 inches in size. It's pretty much like a rhinoceros of the cowrie. And it's called tortoise cowrie because the shell pattern resembles, polished tortoise shell. So again, I want to thank, I don't think we have Scott Johnson in the audience, but I want to thank him and let you know that he's the guy. He's the one who shot those videos underwater. They're priceless. Let me refresh your memory about the cowrie development and growth, and look at the shells that will the different shapes that the shell takes during the growth of a cowrie. And again, let's focus first on the larval shells, the veliger shell. And those shells, as you see next, they resemble nothing like the adult shell. They are really small. They are very thin, usually colorful. They are like golden yellow or orange yellow. And they have a shape that helps accommodate those expansions of the veliger larva. Those expansions are called the villa, one velum, two villa, V-A-V-E-L-A, and they are the structures that help bring food to the mouth of the larva. So let's look now. A local species, the Atlantic gray cowrie, Luris cinerea, very common in the Keys and places like that. This is a juvenile. So if we can break that shell, the shell on the left, eventually you could find something like that inside. The growth of the cowrie shell will envelop completely the previous shell stages. So they kind of quote unquote disappear to the eye, but they are still there inside the shell. And now let's go look at the most radical change, the shell in the beginning. That's the larval shell of that species. A couple of shots I did. Those pictures are black and white because they were done under a scanning electron microscope. And when you do that under the SEM, scanning electron microscope, they lose the color, they lose transparency. All you see is detail of the surface, the relief of the shell. Notice that there are two embayments here. There are two notches, and those notches accommodate the paired villa, those expansions of the veliger larva. So this is the Atlantic gray cowrie. Now let's look at how it looks inside. If you can break a cowrie shell and find that, this is a photo. You don't have to worry about that. I just want to use this photo to show you the so-called bulla stage, the juvenile here, and then the growth and the final expansion of the right lip of the right side lip of the the cowrie that will envelop completely the shell. Let's look at another one, the gray Atlantic, the Atlantic yellow cowrie. I don't know why I said gray, maybe because the pictures are gray. That's the shiny, cool looking tropical Western Atlantic Naria acicularis. And those pictures also done under the scanning electron microscope show, this one here shows the bulla stage that eventually you can find in here. And then at the very top, the protoconch or larval shell showing the aspect. That's really a great little larval shell because, as I said, they are very light, transparent. They have this reticulated aspect. And they are light. They evolve to be light because the animal, the little larva, doesn't want to carry all that weight, right? They don't need their weight at that point. They will need the thickness of the shell once they settle to the bottom. But while they're drifting in the water, they need to have a shell as light as possible. Again, going back to deer cowrie, this is a regular deer cowrie here on the left, and a younger stage of a deer cowrie. That's the bulla stage, the famous bulla stage, and you can see the tip of the shell here. So the protoconch or larval shell would be right here. Would be right here. Next, I want to talk about something that's really interesting in the world of cowries, and it's the presence of oh no, I'm ahead of myself. I want to show you examples of local Northwestern Atlantic cowries, species that you can find in most of the greater Caribbean and some, if not all, also in Florida. The Atlantic yellow cowrie, the Atlantic gray cowrie, the Muséum cowrie, the Macrocypria zebra, which is very closely related to Macrocypria cervus, which is a gray cowrie. There it is again. The mouse cowrie and the Suriname cowrie, which used to be one of the very sought after species of cowries, not very common in its range. It's called Surinamensis because of the first because the first finding of this species was off Suriname in South America. Talking about local cowries, there is a new member of the local cowrie club in the tropical Western Atlantic. And that may be a good thing or not, depending on who you ask. And most people would agree that it's not a desirable situation, given that it is a non-indigenous cowrie. The first cowrie, Nautilus, related to in the same genus as the Atlantic yellow cowrie, the genus Naria. And there are several reports. I get emails almost at an average of, since mid-2023, an average of once a week of people who found one. Or today I got an email from someone who found one in Montserrat in the Caribbean. They come from the Red Sea via the Mediterranean, we believe, and probably came with ballast water. It's hard to determine, but it's all over the place now. This picture is from Palm Beach County. Actually, it's an attractive shell, but it may be a problem for local species. It may be out competing the local cowrie species for food. They feed on sponges. This is a graph from a paper that was led by my colleague, Anton Olejnik from Florida Atlantic, that we published this year in the Nautilus. And it shows more or less the sequence of finding of this species in the greater Caribbean and ending in West Palm Beach. And all there are records from the Keys, records from Broward County, Palm Beach County, and it's here to stay. So if you collect shells, that's one to look for. If you worry about the environment and the conservation of local ecosystems, there's a question there, what's going to happen? That's the location where it was first found in the US. And this here is Lake Worth Lagoon in Palm Beach County. This is a map of Florida showing where Palm Beach County is located at. Peanut Island, very famous place for shelling. And that's the BHB, the famous BHB, Blue Heron Bridge. So they were scuba diving, taking pictures here, to the south of the Blue Heron Bridge when the species was first found. This is a photo actually that I did yesterday of a live specimen, a live thrush cowrie collected by Ken PX on Pelican Shoals, which sits just offshore from Key West. So this is probably the latest record of this species. He picked it up in August this year. Yeah, that's something that's really interesting, and it shows the relationship between sea life or life in general to human intervention. Again, another one of those cases where humans doing their business have caused strange changes in the makeup of local marine species, and we call them the melanistic and rostrate cowries. It's a specialty for some of the people that collect cowries to have some of those shells that are either dark and or have very prominent endings. Or the rostrum is the kind of, I think, muzzle or snout in Latin. So they can be darker and pointed at the ends. They will occur in a few locations in the Southwest Pacific, and most particularly in New Caledonia and parts of Australia. And now there is evidence that the presence of those, there's alterations in the, makeup, the looks of local species is caused by release of metals, especially iron, chromium, nickel, that will, eventually cause this kind of pathological effect, pathological but desirable from a standpoint of collecting. So in New Caledonia, it's prevalent around the southwest end of the main island, around the capital Nouméa, which is the capital of New Caledonia. So they did a study a few years ago, like almost 20 years ago, showing that the melanistic Arabian cowrie has 10 times more iron in the shell than normal ones. And let's take a look again here. Yeah, that little band was part of the old exhibit when I hope to be able to keep showing the shells in the new exhibitions. So this is a map of part of Southwest Pacific. Australia is here. This is New Caledonia here. And the capital city of the town of Nouméa is there. The bay where the release of metals look pretty peaceful and nice. The water is not visually polluted. It's, you can look, it's not a brown water. Doesn't look bad, but the heavy metals are there. And this is a aerial photograph of the area from Google Earth. And this complex here in the middle, this kind of orangish sprawl there, is the metal processing plant. And all the water comes out into the sea, and eventually will cause the problems that are problems for some, but not problems for collectors who like them. And you understand why collectors like them now, I hope. This is those materials, those shells are from the museum collection. You have the collection catalog number here, the size. Well, this being the ring cowrie, the classic ring cowrie, very close species to the money cowrie. And this is a normal shell in dorsal and side view, and that's a rostrate ring cowrie. And very interesting, the rostrum is it's like the shell has this pinched aspect on both front and back end. So that was the ring cowrie. Now the money cowrie, that's a classic yellow money cowrie. They can be whitish with little gray tinges to the shell, and now a rostrate. This is one of my favorite rostrate specimens, really cool looking. But all of that is pathological. That's not normal. It's probably caused by, I mean, not probably, it is caused by human intervention or the release of metals in the water. A eglantine cowrie, has this pretty reticulated aspect, and to the shell, dorsum, or the top of the shell, and now a dark one, and dark and rostrate, the same species. It acquires this very dark color. Sam mentioned the cultural aspects, so I said a few words about it. There's so much that can be said about the human uses of shells in spirituality, in architecture and ornaments, all kinds of venues for expression, human expression using cowrie shells, even in contemporary art. I picked just one up, and I picked one up because this pictures was sent to me by a museum friend, Vincent Barrows, and from Texas, and he was letting me know that there was a archaeological finding in Galveston Island, where they dug this deer cowrie from an archaic. An archaic is in archaeology is anything that's older than X, and but this one is about 5,000 years of age, and there was some reconstitution, some mending of the shell that was kind of damaged here and there, but it is suspected, is because of this hole here, that this shell was used as an ocarina. An ocarina is a flute-like instrument. My dad actually had one, and it's like a kind of a fat, stout flute. And I found online an example of a recent one, and it produces a very melodious sound. It's like a deep flute sound, and there is the idea is that that cowrie was used as an instrument by the local peoples back then in the archaic era there on Galveston Island. If you want to know more about cowries, we have, there are literally dozens of books or guides about the family Cypreidae. But when Felix Lorenz from Germany published these 2 volumes, it became like the Cowriepedia. That's the go-to documents for anything that you want to know about, the currently known species of cowries, their biology, taxonomy. It's a very serious couple of volumes. They're not cheap, but they are super valuable. We do have them in the museum library. I just want to close, getting close to the end. This is a cartoon that was done by my friend David Horton in the occasion of the opening of our cowrie exhibit, the old cowrie exhibit in 2011, the Great Cowrie Drive. And his cowries are probably around the Sunnyvale Causeway. Go into the museum, move them out, and there are our beloved cowries. And with that, I want to thank you and see if you have any questions that I can answer. And the questions I cannot answer, I'll try to find the answer for you maybe a little later. Thanks so much for hanging in there.
Thank you, Jose. Talk to us about this picture you've got right here.
This is today.
My
Yeah,
gosh.
I got to the museum really early, and I saw that, so oh, it's worth a picture.
Wow, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. Well, great presentation. I know there are a couple questions here, lots of accolades, particularly for the videos, and also your photographs of the sort of the transitional phases of cowries growth. So we'll go to the questions and encourage anyone who has questions to send them in via chat. Noah has a question. Where are the best places to find cowrie shells in the Florida Keys? And where are the best places to find cowrie shells on the east coast of Florida?
Well, I think that anywhere, depending on how you're looking for shells, how you're looking for cowries, if you're, let's begin by the Keys. I think that any of the more accessible areas in the Keys, and you have, for the people who don't know the Keys, the Keys are not beach places. There are places where you can go in the water to snorkel, but they are not sprawling beaches like we have in Southwest Florida or East Florida. But I suggest anywhere. I mean, if you're in the lower Keys, the middle lower Keys, Ohio Key, Bahia Honda, um, any of the middle Keys. Also, if you have access to boats, that'll be the best. Places like, especially the areas of the slightly offshore islets like Sombrero Keys and Caris Fort Reef with the lighthouse. You'll be able to find cowries. You have to keep in mind that most of the Keys is super protected by the FKMS, which is the Florida Keys Marine Sanctuary, which is a coalition of different reserves and protected areas. So you may not collect live shells there. They're in some areas. Now on the east coast of Florida, the same thing. If you snorkel anywhere south of, I would say anywhere south of Cape Canaveral. I mean, where you have more of the warm water flowing from the Caribbean, the Gulf Stream, you're liable to find. Okay, there's not a special place for cowries. I mean, any of those places, you have to get lucky to, and you have to have a good eye. And I suggest before you go looking, that you look if you have another cowrie or if you know someone who has one, to really look at them and create a search image, or even put them in the water somewhere. Because once you have the search image, it becomes much easier to find the shells because they will really jump at you. You may be at 10 feet of water, and if there is a 3/4 inch yellow cowrie, you'll see that right away if you know what you're looking for.
You were talking about Peanut Island before in the Lake Worth Lagoon and sort of the Palm Beach, West Palm Beach area. And I think, I don't know if it was a previous talk that you gave or that another speaker gave, but just about maybe it was a paper you refers to, but anyway, but about just the incredible diversity of mollusks that are in that area specifically, through some, combination of where the water's coming in and also just, I guess, lots of introduced species, from it's a port. Um, is Peanut Island, so it's like a fascinating place to shell. Is that a place where you need to dive or snorkel to get to it? And if so, have you done that?
Peanut Island?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I've been to Peanut Island during one of the COA conventions, I think in 2014. And we went by boat. And it's a pretty cool place because it's very famous for shelling. Lots of dead shells there. You can see live mollusks, and there is the famous for non-shelling activities. There's the famous Kennedy JFK bunk, the nuclear shelter that we can visit. You can visit. I think is managed by the National Park Service, so there's a lot to see there. It's a very cool place.
Angie has a couple questions. How was Nadia Turtis introduced? Was hull of a ship, ballast water?
To be very technical and very honest, we don't know. I mean, there's no evidence that there's no one that saw what happened and when it happened. But drawing from general knowledge about that, usually you can have larvae. Yeah, some of those species have larvae that live a long time in the plankton, and if they are in ballast water, they can cross the ocean. And once the ballast water is released, the larvae will settle, and they will find, the basic environmental conditions very similar to the regions where they came from, warm water in this case, and they can proliferate and kind of quote unquote take over.
Thank you. And her second question, why do melanistic cowries also have rough dorsums?
Um, yeah, that's interesting. That's true. They have this pebbly aspect. I think it's related to, it's probably the same pathology, the same, you know, physiological mechanism that causes the dark color will, you know, presence of heavy metals will probably cause that too.
I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. Nikemi asks, are cooked ringtop cowries heated to make them whiter?
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about things like that for, 36 hours nonstop, but yeah, there's a whole section of a whole, you can write a book about the alteration of cowries by people who are less than honest in the shell dealing world, where they will bake some shells to enhance the, oranges and even, doctor common shells to make them look like very rare and expensive ones. So that's the whole thing that it's really not the natural history or biology of the, the animals.
Tom asks a question that I can answer even. He asks, is it possible to view this talk later? Answer is yes, it's recorded and will be posted to the museum's website in the education section. Usually it takes us a couple days to do that, but check back after a couple days and you can view it at any time. Jane asks, approximately how long does it take until the adult shell is completely formed?
Well, I think that will depend on the species. Yeah, I maybe a couple of years. I really don't know. I mean, we have 200 species, and I'm sure that there is a huge range of variation from species A to species B. And sometimes not only in the size of the shell doesn't relate to the longevity of the length of maturation. You may have a small cowrie that takes many years to grow to that size, or you may have a big one that will grow really fast. But I really don't know, precise numbers there.
Kelly asks a question about what are current threats to cowries in Florida? You mentioned some of the conservation challenges with pollution, metal pollution, and in the South Pacific, and introduced species now in the Caribbean. But are there other threats to cowries in our area?
Um, let's take the east coast of Florida because we don't have cowries on this side here, except for the geocowrie in the Gulf of Mexico. But I think if you look at the Keys in East Florida, which is a classic, well, high diversity, coral reef tract, that comes all the way from, the the westernmost dry tortugas, marquesas, going along the Hawk Channel all the way to Miami and so on. The main problem there is the demise of corals, and a lot of those species, although cowries do not necessarily eat corals, but they are part of the system. And if we begin, and we're already begun that process of basically destroying the coral reefs, many of the species that are associated with them will perish. So in a general fashion, yeah, there are threats and the demise of coral reefs to me, being probably the worst one. And that happens all over the world, not only here.
Mm-hmm. All right, Susanna has got a big question here. Susanna asks, is it ethical to purchase cowries?
Well, it depends. I mean, it depends. In some cases, not. There are probably, and I'm not the one to, I will say that with caution, but there are probably areas in the world where cowries are collected using methods that are destructive to the environment, like turning coral heads to look under them, which is sometimes where you can find them, and so on. And so I think in some cases, if you're buying some shell from someone who had it for 20 years, it's already there. So
Right.
I don't know how.
So that's sort of a broader question about how they're collected, how mollusks generally are collected, and the method by which. Right. Yeah. Gail asks, when metals change coloration and shape, change the coloration and shape a lot, how do you determine which cowrie it really is? I guess, do we know if identification becomes a challenge as
Actually,
those changes take place?
Actually not, and I'll tell you why. I mean, first of all, and I actually saw the question and already wrote the answer here. So a couple of things. The shell is not the only way to identify a cowrie. In many species, in many like Murexes and all, it becomes complicated if you don't have the shell. Let's assume that you don't have the shell, you only have the animal, the shell is gone. There's a pattern to the mantle. Remember those little protuberances that are in the videos that you can see, little papillae, that's very unique. I mean, each species has a different arrangement and color and pattern, if you will. Another one is the radula. The radula is the raspy tongue, the tongue they use to chew their food or rasp their food with. And the radula usually are very species specific. So it's like a fingerprint for a species. And the other one is that, and that's probably the one that's was mostly used for assigning the name of a species to a very deformed individual, which is to know the whole gamut from a perfectly healthy shell to one that has been altered. I mean, there are forms that are transition forms, and if you put a series together, you can go from healthy one to damaged one with all the intermediary forms and make the connection there. I think that's more or less what it is.
Okay. Joel asks, are there any species that are endangered or of special concern?
Well, I don't think from a technical standpoint, are you looking at the Red Book of the International Union for Conservation of Nature and Environment? I don't think there are any species listed there. Although that doesn't mean they are not endangered. I mean, again, we talked about coral reefs, and lots of those species are reliant on the health of coral reefs to perpetuate. So from that angle, yeah, there's probably several that are threatened, but we really don't have good records of it at this point.
Two more questions, one of which I can answer. Suzanne asks, if you have time, can you address the history of cowries as currency? And like Jose said, we think the subject of cowries used as currency, used in a wide range of endeavors across cultures and through history. That's something that we're looking forward to focusing on in a future talk. And it's a big subject. It's a fascinating subject, and will also be one that is a focus in the new exhibits in the Great Hall of Shells. And Tom asks, regarding mating for life, do we know if a cowrie will find a new mate after the death of their betrothed?
Well, I wouldn't know that, no. And remember, I've said that we caution that there is. It's not something that's set in stone. I don't think I maybe have I may be missing something, but there is talk that they do that. There's not a set of scientific reports saying, hey, we tagged that, and if they were always together with little GPS things, but it's believed that they do that. And if one perishes, well, and the other one is still up to it, they probably try to find a mate if they're free there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, great. Thank you very, very much, Jose, for the presentation. Lots of thank yous on the chat. Lots of great job. And thank you everyone for joining for this presentation, for those of you who are regulars for our talks generally. Thank you for tuning in and for supporting the museum and for being a part of what we do. And we'll look forward to seeing you at the museum as soon as possible, and watch our emails and our newsletters, and we'll see you down the road. Have a great rest of your day or evening, wherever you are.
Bye.